for this point. And I'm going to share my sound and the video and the welcome address by Commissioner Viviana DeCohen.
Welcome, everyone. Let's talk about a Tuesday. Let's talk about taking this opportunity to listen, learn, and lay down assumptions while lifting up diversity. Let's talk about those who've paved the way with the ultimate sacrifice that we may all have, pride. It's time for a chat. Let's talk about it. Welcome, everyone. Let's talk about a Tuesday. Let's talk about taking this opportunity to listen, learn, and lay down assumptions while lifting up diversity.
All right. Well, we thank Madam Commissioner in her absence for that welcome address. And so now I'm going to toss to my colleague, Deputy Commissioner Angela Indardeo, who will frame out the day's events and let us know how it's all going to go down. Angela.
Hi, good afternoon, and happy Pride. Woo! Get a little bit of, all right. So exciting to be here. And first, let me just thank you all for taking the just the time out of your day. You know, how special is that? You can see we have a fairly small, but I'm sure impactful audience. Just thank you for being here today, for taking the time out of your day. As mentioned by Dr. Branch, my name is Angela Indardeo. I'm a proud member of the LGBTQ community, plus community, a 26-year veteran, U.S. Army retired, and very happy to serve as Deputy Commissioner East for New York State Department of Veteran Services. Real quick, I will not hog all of the time, but in this role that I serve, just so you all know, in case you need me in the future, I do supervise the Veteran Services Advisors across New York State on the East Side. I serve the advisors and staff members to help veterans and all those who serve and their family members to obtain their well-deserved benefits, just to kind of put it in a nutshell. And we do so much, not limited to helping them obtain their health benefits, disability benefits, pensions, tax exemptions, housing, food, discharge upgrades. One we're very proud of, which is the Restoration of Honors Act. And that's near and dear to my heart because of the don't ask, don't tell period that some may know, others who have served during that time and may have gotten caught up in that situation. I'm happy to explain, train, and help anyone who would like more information about that. But again, going back to the agenda for today, like Dr. Branch mentioned, we will talk about our panelists first and foremost. I'd like to go into introducing our wonderful and amazing panelists for today. We will introduce them. I'd like to talk about them a little bit and actually have them talk about themselves. And then we'll go into the disclosure documentary. Owen and Daniel are our amazing panelists. We'll have them introduce themselves, tell us about the amazing things that they've done, about their transition and their continued challenges and their journeys, and then we'll embark on the documentary itself. Disclosure was directed by Sam Feder. If you haven't heard of it, it tackles the issue of transgender representation in film and in television. The film interrogates how the projected images of trans life has influenced the perception of trans identity for both cisgender and transgender audiences. And it's a very compelling film. If you haven't seen it or heard about it, I'm sure it will touch you as it has touched many people throughout this community. Now, I personally had an opportunity to watch it myself with my fiance and her son, who is 20 years old and is in the process of transitioning. And it was amazing to feel the room and understand how they are better communicating now after the film, because it's a perspective that only two people who love each other can try to understand each other a little bit better by watching this film. And so I love it for those who have transitioned, who love others who are transitioning or have transitioned, because it's heartwarming and it's telling the story of, like Leslie said, the lived experience. So with that, I'll go back to introducing our wonderful panelists, who are just lovable people in my experience with them. And we'll start with Daniel.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. It's so nice to be with you all today. Our name is Daniel Dobies. We are the Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, and Edie Windsor LGBTQ plus fellow, who sits in the Governor's Office of Diversity and Inclusion. We use we, us, ours pronouns, which is a personal choice for us. So when referring to us, you can use you in the second person, they, she, he in the third person. We use we, us, ours pronouns for a couple reasons. First, as everyone here in state service knows, state service is not a one-person job. It's really a community effort. No single eye can do anything. But second is to recognize and bring along the people who got us here. You know, we did not get here alone. Our family, our friends, but also the amazing trailblazers whose shoulders we literally stand on, including Marsha, Sylvia, and Edie, who our fellowship is named for. We've been in the governor's office since September. We're still quite new to state service, but we're very excited. In chamber, we work on many issues, but also our job covers queer policy. And so we're very excited to be here to share in this experience of watching Disclosure again, and then also talking about the issues that it brings up. It's interesting because the movie's only 4 years old, but seeing how things change and where we are in the environment that we're in, it hit us differently. Yes, we're not sure what else we were supposed to say, but that'll do for now.
Thank you so much, Daniel. We really appreciate you sharing your story and being here available for us today. We'll move over now to Owen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Owen Gilbo. I am the ADA coordinator and designee for reasonable accommodation, amongst other things, for the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. It has been a journey. And so one of the interesting things I think it's important to share, and how it is unique for all of us, is I was 45 years old when I heard the word transgender, and then understood a little bit about who I was. And if there was a word, there were others. And that's really important, because for 45 years, I truly believe there was something wrong with me, and I was unique in who I was attracted to, how I identified, and doesn't there's a lot that goes with that, right? It could be mental health issues. It could be, we know for a large portion of our community, suicide attempts or suicide ideation or completed suicide. Unfortunately, abuse, substance abuse, alcoholism can be a thing, a reality of trying to live in a world that tells you you are wrong. And I know we're going to hear from Laverne Cox, but she said this about 2 weeks. I heard her say this about 2 weeks after I had said it to a therapist. It's not that you're doing something wrong. Society tells you that you are wrong. So as Daniel pointed out, the progress we make and the journeys we take, I'm open. Not all trans guys, I should have said, I use he, him pronouns. I'm a trans man. And I, our journeys are all different, and the folks that come along with us, our families, our friends. For me, my wife, she fought very hard to accept her identity as lesbian, and then her significant other comes and says, well, funny thing about that, I don't identify as a woman. I really identify as a man. And now how's that going to work out, right? And so we didn't know, and we really just had to take faith that it would either work out or we'd have to part in a way that was, nobody was at fault or whatever. So that's a little piece. I am passionate about the work I do. I've advocated for the LGBTQ plus community, and particularly for the trans community, in getting gender passed, and a variety of other things. I continue to be out in my agency, and I can say that has brought a lot of folks having that visibility. It's brought a lot of relaxation, or I don't know, relaxation, but a lot of folks have felt more comfortable coming out and being their authentic selves, knowing there are others. So I think part of what this documentary helps is about the visibility piece as well, which is important. I didn't know about Laverne Cox. I wasn't an Orange is the New Black person, and I didn't know any other trans people. So that is important to begin to be able to identify with some folks. So I look forward to this, and thank you, Dr. Branch and Angela, for Deputy Commissioner, for inviting me to be part of this.
Thank you, and thank you both. And I do believe that this documentary helps with a true understanding, or at least a little bit more of an understanding of the transgender community. And I certainly appreciate it. The more we can sit down and help ourselves with understanding rather than judging. And I appreciate it. And I appreciate you all being courageous and being willing to share your story. So thank you very much. Lessie, did you want to start the documentary, or should we ask the opening questions now or after?
So I'm thinking we will save them for later. We certainly invite folks to share information in the chat about who you are, what agency you're from, and if you know any veterans, definitely please, as a plug for DVS, as Deputy Commissioner Indardeo said, we want to help veterans with some of the more practical aspects of living, benefits, food, things like that. So definitely point them to us. And just a little humor, I guess. So I arrived on planet Earth in the 1960s, and when I came up with the idea to have this event for Pride, I definitely wanted to pull Deputy Commissioner Indardeo in. And so I'm like, yes, I want to have this Netflix and chill event, this, that, and the other, right? And so she, and I'm just pulling up and drawing up all the documents about Netflix and chill. And mind you, I got here in the 20th century. And so then she's like, it was clear to her that I, am not of the Netflix generation. And so she's like, she pulls me to the side. She was like, so yeah, I want to pull on this thread a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, what's up? So then she was like, Netflix and chill. Do you know what it means? And I'm like, yeah, it means we're going to watch a movie, right? And she was like, no. And I was like, oh, what does it mean? And so then she told me, and I was like, oh, well, that's not what we will be doing during the lunch hour on June 18th. Just no, we're not doing that. So I quickly changed the title of it to Netflix and Chat. So this way, and it's funny because every time I would say Netflix and chill around, the young people, they would just snicker. And I'm like, what is so funny? And so I sort of got it that, this 60-year-old lady is talking about Netflix and chilling, and clearly she does not know what she's talking about, or maybe she does. But Angela, thank you for correcting me and teaching me something. So it was definitely a lighthearted moment. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording for now. And then I will, excuse me. Um,
Wow. Can you all hear me? Okay. So, what an inspirational and emotional film. I don't believe that there can be true understanding unless you're in the lived experience of the struggles and challenges of these journeys, and within just the transgender community as a whole, and just what sharing can really bring to the table. I believe we can all agree on that. It can make a difference, and a positive impact, especially if we think about those coming before all of us who are embarking on a journey in kind of a new generation, and breaking open new doors. It can definitely make an impact as we share our stories as humans, and share our human experiences. And so this is as you all heard throughout the film, just groundbreaking, emotional, and truly, I'm looking forward to hearing our panelists' stories. As humans, I like to just say that it's just so important that we take the time to understand each other as individuals, because what the film shows, and what I took from it, is how preconceived notions can paint different pictures, but our stories and our representation can hopefully help us continue to invite positive change. So, questions for our wonderful panelists, Owen and Daniel. Feel free to answer how you feel comfortable, and in whatever order you'd like. I will not choose that. Please feel free to jump right on in. In a word or a phrase, how did seeing this film make you feel?
Owen, we'll let you start.
You know, I'm going to preface that by saying one word. Wow. Um, conflicted, conflicted. And let me just explain. Can I explain that or no? Conflicted. Um, and I think that some of the folks on the documentary said this, like, I feel really great. I don't feel so great because, like, I was happy when this character did this, but yet, and now I saw that it's not a good thing. But yeah, conflicted, or I thought roller coaster might have been a better one, but I think that was about my emotions. But really, roller coaster or conflicted. I think they're the same.
Yeah, we'll echo that. That's a really nice way to put it, Owen. With conflicted, we were thinking of words like nuance or like complexity, which isn't necessarily a feeling, but maybe conflicted gets at that of how, you watch someone like Candace Kane both moving ahead, trans visibility, and sort of paving a way for um, careers for other trans actors, and while also having to embody some of these narratives and stereotypes that are, you know, wrong and false, um and we think a lot about too how this is a documentary about show business, but that, very similar tropes and ideas and structures exist in any profession, including state government. What we have to do to see like who 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 are we here? Who do we see who's sort of leading the way? Who can we be, right? Who can we really be? And so some other emotions that sort of came up were like fear and sadness. Just sort of thinking about all the things that maybe we've decided we couldn't be because we didn't see anyone else doing them. Like we really wonder, like, could we be governor of New York? You know, probably not. Like we don't know that we really believe that we could. Um, and so it's interesting. It's like it's conflicted. That's really good way of putting it on. It's a lot of conflicting feelings.
Absolutely. And thank you both for sharing. It kind of reminds me, and to use not exactly similar, but like it's like a stigma attached to being trans, right? And forgive me if I'm putting any words, but if there's a stigma attached to trans is bad, or trans is dangerous, or trans is unacceptable, then how do I feel comfortable in that space if that's innately who I am? How will I feel safe, comfortable, and accepted if if I am known to be that, and that's who I am? And so that's how it you want to evolve. We all, how can I be authentic? How can I be my authentic self if this is considered I will be looked at in a bad light? And so the culture has to change. And so that's how I also see it. And so thank you both for sharing, and hope we continue to move in a positive direction with everyone sharing their stories and lived experiences. Um, so next question. Thank you both again. Does anyone want to add anything before I move to the next question?
I do. And just hearing both Daniel and Owen, um, it seems that, well, authenticity is supposed to be organic, but when that organic doesn't fit within a certain frame, it wants to be uh, prescribed. And so something that is prescribed may not be organic. And I don't know if it's a paradox, but clearly um, it needs to be figured out, if you will, or it may never be figured out. And while I'm not, part of the trans or the LGBT community, I am part of a marginalized community, many of them, in fact. And so the sad thing is, but the reality is, and that we need to understand is we should never think that we have arrived, because there's always a competition. That's how this system is set up, the economic system, the social system. It's a competition, and so there's always going to be the mindset of for me to win, somebody else has to lose. And until we can change that mindset, we're always going to have to um, tell our own stories, because we cannot rely on others to tell it for us. And they, in fact, cannot, because they don't have our lived experiences.
Thank you. Very well said, Dr. Branch. And please, for our audience, we're tracking that you're there. We appreciate any thoughts that you may have, any questions. Please put them in the chat box, and we'll bring them to the conversation now or at the end. Thank you very much. And so back to our panelists. Please describe a moment or scene in the film that you found particularly affirming, challenging, intriguing, or moving. And what was it about that scene that was especially compelling for you?
I think
Don't you both
conflicted.
speak at once?
I think conflicted. I think conflicted is still the word. Yeah, I felt all of it. I'll go. And it's been interesting for me to watch it and watch it again, right? And I'll preface that, prefacing a lot of things, but I'll say that because there's a lot I just turned 60. There's a lot now at 60. I've been Owen, authentically Owen, out there as Owen for 13 years. So I lived, my birth name was Angie. I lived Angie for, do the math, 47 years. 45 to 47 was whatever the blend of Angie Owen is. But there's a lot that I didn't know. So not only was it 2009, I was 45 years old, I heard the word transgender, but I go back and I see all those films and I'm like, how did I not, I remember Victor Victoria, right? Because that's how old I am. I remember, but I remember The Crying Game. I remember some of those. The kind of horror slasher kind of thing. I don't watch those movies, so part of me was like, I'm glad I didn't watch that stuff. But in the things I saw, I was like, oh yeah, well, why didn't I react to that? Or why didn't I know the word? Or why didn't I identify more with a character or any of those things? Um, and then realizing the impact that those movies that I realized I did see had on me and the message they fed me that I still carry and maybe don't even realize I carry. For instance, the one that was particularly challenging was Boys Don't Cry, right? Boys Don't Cry. It was 10 years, came out 10 years before I understood transgender, but I identified with that character. But what happened to that character was clear to me, right? Was really clear and still is. I still carry. My greatest fear is being in a situation where somebody, wow, I can't believe I'm going to be this revealing or this much disclosure, but it's a reality to think that if somebody discovers, right, uh, or you share with somebody and then they know that they can attack you, rape you, kill you for just that. And so I don't always acknowledge that fear, but I was doing a gender identity training, and I won't say where in the state, in a particular region of the state. And as part of my position, not, working in DEIA, and I had done this training a lot, and I'm very out. My training it just outs me in so many ways. And I'd always felt pretty comfortable with doing that and that it had a positive impact. I was in this particular region and I didn't get that feeling. And I really started worrying about what would happen when I left what I saw as the protected area, right? So that's a big impact. And I kind of rushed to my hotel and it's like, I'm good here. I'm good in this little territory. I'll eat dinner, and you start figuring out how you're going to keep safe. Like, where will I eat dinner? Is there room service? There isn't. Okay. Hey, that bag of chips I got, that's good enough, right? Or something like that. So I think Boys Don't Cry really is one that impacted me. And then the other thing was, it wasn't a scene from a movie, but it was a comment made that being out as a trans guy, or even more so, identifying as a lesbian and then coming out as a trans guy, you have betrayed the lesbian community and you've betrayed women. You've gone to the other side. That's a tough one. And I still get that sense. So I read very much at least everybody tells me, right? Very much as a cisgender, white, older, you know, hopefully middle class guy, right? And they always want to know why I do DEIA, like what do I have to contribute? The LGBTQ community half the time looks at me and goes, got a gay kid, a trans kid, like what's this guy, why is this guy around? Because I talk about my wife, what's my deal? Am I even a safe person? And when you explain, then it's sort of, depending who you're explaining to, it's like, oh, and sometimes I've had lesbians go, oh, as if that was the biggest disappointment and not to be trusted because you've already betrayed, the community, so to speak. So those are the two pieces. But there was just a lot in there, in that whole documentary. So, Daniel.
Um, yeah, for us, there's a couple moments that we think are related. One is at the very beginning when Bianca Lee is saying that she identifies with the leading woman, right? Like she's not identifying with Michael Caine as the whatever villain serial killer, but she's identifying with the leading woman. And there's a piece to that coming back to representation of what's possible. And like for us in our gender journey, we consider ourselves gender queer. We have facial hair with long hair and nails, and we wear dresses, and it's sometimes confused. Like just today on the subway, someone looked at us and said, "No more gowns. You don't look attractive in gowns." And we had to look at them and say, "You don't get to tell us what we look good in." Um, and so there's a little bit of a lot of feelings that rush back of like, what were we looking at? That we were identifying with, or what were the examples that were there that we were identifying with, even if they didn't fully capture like who we are trying to become. And then the kind of piece on the other side of the movie that speaks to this is when Jen Richards is talking about seeing that father of a trans kid talk about like how magical his child is, and what he's learning, and how great this is. And Jen's really wanting or grappling with the fact that that's not what her family did for her. And like, can anyone, and actually a trope that many people talked about in the movie is like, can anyone love me for me, or like who I actually am? And there's a piece of this where we do what we appreciate about this movie is there is an exercise for all of us to really think about, are we really who we are trying to be, or like who we are inside? Do we have enough examples to really try that? Like, what are the ways that we're still trying to fit in, right? Trying to fit into categories that make sense to us, to other people. And so then we also find like Sandra Caldwell's final moment in the movie where she gets to say, like, I went into an audition and for the first time I got to say, like, I'm a trans woman. And to be like, so we're sort of rambling now, but like just these moments of, it's hard to maybe express who you are, right? And it's hard, like it's not one thing. It's not one thing for any of us, right? There's so much complexity in all our identities beyond just gender. But watching these, like a lot of the people in the movie be able to step more fully into who they are, or to say like, you know what? That's something I didn't know that I wanted or didn't think that I could have, but now it is. It's both like, it fills us with hope, and it also fills us with, and it also offers a mirror, right? A mirror to look in and say, okay, how are we doing that, or trying to do that, or are we doing that enough? So those are kind of the moments in the movie for us that resonated.
If I could hop in there, it's interesting because I'm busy in the chat, but there's a book that I recommend. It's Homo Sacer by a Italian philosopher. I think his name is Giorgio Agamben, and it talks about how the power of the law can either protect or put outside of the law people who society deems undesirable. But secondly, this notion of sociological concepts of the looking glass self and master status. And so people Right. And so to me, it's very interesting because we, in the founding documents of this country, we have the power to self this and self interests, and nobody's interest is above anybody else's interest until it isn't the case, right? And so it's just very interesting to follow the thread of where it goes from being okay to not being okay. And obviously, or maybe not, it's when you go against what is viewed as sacred in terms of, dominant culture. And so it's really a push and a pull between the power to say who you are versus the power who others get to exercise that say who you are. And so this is going to be a fight forever and ever.
Yeah, and in the gender context, because obviously there are parallels to so much. To you can parallel this to race, you can parallel this to the religion you practice, your immigration status, your ability, or if you have a disability. Um, and in the gender field, what we find interesting and really rings true for us is best phrased by one of our favorite activists, Alok Vadmenon, who talks about, as gender is this, whatever you're presenting, a lot of times what's coming up in someone else is possibility that they didn't see for themselves. So it's that mirror moment again. And there's something interesting about walking through the world in a way that is between, or is in a way that I don't know, doesn't necessarily fit all the boxes, and seeing people and seeing also like what's coming up for you, but also what's coming up for them. And I think there's a way in which gender, we all really have, I mean, everything we have this, but in gender, there's this real touchstone of, who, how, how did we all get here on our own gender journeys? Which is something that we think is left very unexamined until you you are, or you realize, or you realize what you've always had been, which is someone who doesn't fit into one of these boxes that you were told or prescribed. So yeah, we find that interesting too. And on the legal point, it's interesting too, the history of erasing the T, right? Erasing the trans out of legal fights. HRC, when they were trying to push for anti-discrimination federal laws, there was a camp of people that thought, okay, let's push for LGB first and then come back for the trans community. And so you see, right, exactly what Dr. Branch is talking about, right? Like this idea that even within the community itself, there is this fight, right? This lack of abundance, this fight for there's only so many rights for all of us, or like we need to do this step first. Like we can't actually achieve this together. And it's interesting being in state government, and specifically being in Governor Hochul's office, right? And trying to meld the politics and what people think other people are ready for, right? Like what we think New York State is ready for, while also doing what Dr. Branch talked about, which is like telling our story, right? Living our life and being here, and that push-pull of like being in this office and wondering sometimes, and knowing that not every New Yorker might be ready for for I don't know, for this. So it's which we like we all had, like we all can talk about those moments being in state service of like meeting people who are like, are you ready for who we are and what we actually have to offer?
That's important. I want to point out, I guess this is a good time as any, is I don't want to talk about those people who want to erase us in the past because they're there. They're very bold to tell us in a 200 and some odd page document what they plan to do with us 2024 leading into 2025 goes their way, right? And I try when I'm in the government hat not to be explicit about parties, but there are folks who want to make it illegal to be us, therefore being able to incarcerate us. There was a person running for governor in Mississippi who thought all trans people should be lined up and executed. That was his solution to the problem we are. And there were people that voted for him. He got like 20% of the vote or some 15-20% of the vote. That's a scary thought. And there are other people and people say, well, you're just worried. I mean, it's not going to happen. There's a lot of things we thought weren't going to happen are going to happen. So be really aware of that, because I know I am, right? And I have to live like it's going to be okay. Because if I think about, if it's not, if I think about what might happen, dating, that can be very debilitating. And um, going back to, and this is going to hit on one of our questions later on, but that person in the mirror and how we present, right, and how we are, and I'm going to admit that sometimes, and I have to question myself. So this is sort of when we take in all the stigma sort of focused on the LGBTQ plus community, is sometimes I get to talking about something and I thought, did I sound really gay? Like, did I come off as a gay guy? And then I have to say, like, what difference does that make? And I'll be like, but then I'm not really man enough if I'm coming across. But I realized that has nothing really to do with me and all to do with all that I've learned about all of those things and what is valued and what isn't, right? As if there are a hierarchy of gender identities and characteristics of gender and sexual orientation. And, there's this matrix of, where do I stand? So I'm careful about that. And, and sometimes, because I do talk to myself, and I'll say man, that was Angie was coming right through. That was all Ange right there, right? That was like, your Martha Stewart just slipped right out, right? Because I used to be real crafty and everything. The reality is when I came out, I wouldn't read Martha Stewart. You're in line at the grocery store and there's the magazines. I so wanted to pick up Martha Stewart, but I'm like, no, I am not picking up Martha Stewart, right? I didn't wear pink shirts or even lavender or purple, no matter how much I like them, no matter how much guys look really awesome in pink shirts or whatever. It's just like certain colors, so like I had learned growing up in the binary, like here were the things I needed to do and how I needed to present, regardless of what I liked, how I felt like being, how I felt like whatever. And I think one of the big things, and we'll talk about social constructs as well, is that guys don't cry, right? Boys don't cry. Guys don't cry. Guys aren't emotional. Guys don't talk about their emotions, right? And I can't tell you how hard it is to find guy friends that don't talk about sports, drinking beer or drinking or all these different things, right? It's like I need somebody to talk. So I had all these gal friends, because they can talk about issues. And I have found some folks, but it's a little dangerous, right? You gotta kind of try people out. And so and then I'll wait till we get to the gender or the social construct about that. But I like the way you put it, that person in the mirror, right? Um, because I don't go stealth. And so stealth, for those of you who don't know, is that, and a lot of guys choose to be stealth, is that there's some emergency alert going off. Sorry. Um, that it's they don't want to talk about themselves. So if they want to talk about playing ball, they translate, you translate your past into what it would have been acceptable to be, being a straight guy. I just say, and I'm not that way, because Daniel, one of the things I love is you use the pronoun we, because it's not like when I changed my name, all of a sudden Angie didn't exist, right? Owen has always existed. Owen has always existed. Angie kept Owen alive until Owen could be free to be authentic, right? So I share things, but I'm really clear to tell people, you don't ask people what their real name is. You don't ask people, what was your name? What was your this or that, right? And that's really important. But I share because I think it's, number one, it's my journey, but it's also to realize that some topics are okay, some aren't. I don't hide pictures. I have a niece who didn't know I was trans, but really was looking at some, and I'll shut up, but was looking at pictures from her father's past. And she was just like, I don't know how to tell you this, but Uncle Owen looks like a girl, and nobody said anything. And they went some more pictures, and she's like, no, seriously, Uncle Owen looks like a girl. And that never went anywhere. And I was like, really? That was a missed opportunity. I wasn't there. But that's how I came out to her, is remember when you were looking at the pictures and you said, yeah, well, I was, and that was, she's like, oh my God, that's funny. I got it. But that's sort of that mirror thing. And I'll turn it over to our moderator.
Thank you so much for sharing your personal story in reference to the film. I think acceptance and self acceptance are so important, and this is it's so challenging when society, has these stigmas, and it's tough to be authentic. There were lots of talks about family acceptance, and this for transgender people. I can definitely imagine, not personally, but it can be so tough because we want to be accepted. We all do. We're human. And I can definitely imagine being disregarded by family, or them having a tough time accepting and loving can be just so challenging. So again, thank you both for sharing in the workspace and in the family space. Being accepted socially and by family has to be one of the toughest things. And so, understanding a little bit more in the film, Laverne Cox shares, according to a study from GLAAD, 80% of Americans don't actually personally know someone who is transgender. How do you think having personal connections changes the way a person looks at media portrayals of trans people compared to someone who doesn't or thinks they don't know any transgender people?
Yeah, it's not even just it's not even just media portrayals in the sense of like show business media, but also like media portrayals in terms of what's being said about trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming people that's leading to, some of this horrific legislation that Owen was talking about, and trying to criminalize and make not just illegal, but eradicate white trans people. Um, so, it's it goes from again this applies to lots of things. We talked about knowing queer people, not necessarily trans people, but knowing queer people, and it's harder. It becomes more complicated when you know someone and have a relationship with them, and that's really what we see a lot of life, a lot of work, a lot of state service really being, right, is being in relationship with each other as coworkers of state employees, but also in relationship with the New York staters that we serve. And so, the more you know people and where they're coming from, and that they have things that they love and people that they love and dreams. the harder it becomes to flatten that person into something that's scary, right? Something that is to be feared, something that is to be controlled or eradicated.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important. Danielle, by the way, I think you're fabulous. I just have to say that.
You think you're fabulous, Owen.
Yeah, so we have the little love fest
I think
here,
you're
but
both fabulous.
yeah, thank you. But so I talked and so Dr. Branch and I are from the same era. And so we were it was the binary, and all I knew from when I was like 4 was I needed to get to the other side, right? Like I just wanted to be, I was, and I wanted to be able to be a guy in the world or a boy or, go ahead at age it up. And so when I first heard the word non-binary, I was like, how does that work? Like, what is that? And somebody might kind of embrace both genders. Like, how does that, like, I spent all my time fighting to be a guy, and here's my image of this guy, right? But when I started meeting folks, and part of it was through web workshops that I did, right? We did, I helped found an organization called Gender Equality New York, and we were going around, and our workshop was everything you wanted to know about being transgender, but were afraid to ask, right? That was it. So but I got to know, non folks who identify as non-binary, gender queer, gender fluid, and all of that. But by understanding, hearing their stories, being in a safe space where we could swap information, right? And then it's like, oh yeah. And then the interesting thing is go back to the mirror, and also talk about, Daniel, I think you said this, like sometimes people fear what they start to feel or see in themselves, right? And I'm like, oh, I get that. Yeah, I get that. Like, oh, yeah, that wasn't so bad. So I think, but for me, it's harder for folks to just out disown you or hate you when they really know, once they get to know you. And that's not to say that family members don't do it and they don't whatever, but I've got some uncles that refused, and one is dead now, and he refused to acknowledge. The other's still alive, and I don't care to play the game of who I am. He doesn't approve of me. I don't approve of him, for a lot of reasons. But I think some of that and why people, accept you or don't accept you or whatever, but people also, when they get to know you, then they get to think you're a safe person. At least that's been my experience. And so people have come up to me and said, I have a trans son, or my kid just came out to me as non-binary. It's so good to have somebody talk about it and to just know it's okay. And in my in-person classes, people get to look around and people aren't throwing up, people aren't getting violent, people are nodding their head or doing whatever. And then it becomes okay to come out as the parent of, or the grandparent of, or your good friend is, or then it becomes okay for everyone to be related to people who are just living authentically. And then in other ways, for people to be their authentic selves, however they identify, or what their orientation is. So I think it really helps for folks to know people. I do laugh that a lot of people, I mean, I get that, and I use it as a sometimes I use it as a weapon when people are telling me they don't, that they can tell and they've never met anybody. And I will ask, well, how do you know? Oh, I can tell. I'll be like, really? How can you tell? And I kind of play it out. I play it along, right? Because I want to hear what they got to say. And there's a particular New York State senator that I know exactly how they think, because they didn't, they thought they knew, you know, who I was. And sometimes I'll come out because it's just funny at some point and go, well, here's the funny thing, or I'll do a survey. How many of you have ever met somebody who's trans, And if the whole room, nobody raises their hand, I'm like, it's your lucky day, And so, but I think it is important. And one of the key words, and it's in the second part of the question, is they don't think they know, right? Because none of us ever know. And that's a big thing, is to realize is that none of us ever know what the other person's gender identity is unless they tell us. We have no idea. I was misgendered as Angie my entire life, never misgendered as Owen. Nobody ever questioned it. People spent more time explaining what gender I was as Angie from early on. Now, it's not a boy, it's a girl. It's not a man, it's a woman. Oh no, pronouns and it's whole thing. And it got to the point where it was really tiring, because it's also embarrassing,
Mm.
because somehow you're not fitting the gender you're supposed to be, and yet, it's not okay to be the gender everybody thinks you are, kind of thing. So that's, but I think getting to know folks, and sometimes it's really like, what, people say, like, do you think that's a, my mom still does this. You think that's a man or a woman? I don't know. What does it matter? Like, it's a person. That's what I see. And I just have to add, because it's really funny, when I came out to my family, which was, it turned out okay, but it took me a year, and I really thought, is this my last November? Is this my last Thanksgiving and my last Christmas and whatever? The thing was, Chaz Bono had just come out, and Cher was having a little issue with it. And so for my mother, her claim to fame was, I don't know what Cher's got such a problem with. I don't have a problem with it. So she felt like she had one up Cher, and that made it okay for her to accept my coming out. And hey, whatever it takes, right? But so that's when Chaz came up in the documentary, I'm like, I don't know what Cher had a problem with. So next question, I guess.
Thank you both for those authentic answers and feedback. I love it. So the next questions are about understanding gender construction. And so, what does it mean to say that? And it's interesting that you brought it up in your response, Owen. What does it mean to say that gender is a social construct, or that there is such a thing as a real man or a real woman? And who gains power by declaring that some people do not fit within the boundaries of manhood or womanhood? What are your thoughts?
Oh, so many. Um,
Conflicted. No.
Right?
the who gains power by making these
Categories.
categories is is um is just a great question, because it's to us it's similar to like follow the money. It's like the people who gain power from that are people who are looking to amass power, exert power, and be able to hold on to power over probably more than just the groups, like just that group, like whatever's going on with people who want to assert that this is what a woman is going to be, this is what a man is going to be, are probably not going to stop there in terms of like asserting power over lots of different groups. So that's a thought. I mean, gender construction just as a concept, or the idea is that you know we as humans created language, created concepts to be able to talk to each other. And in doing so, a couple of those concepts are about gender, about what is a man, what is a woman, what is male, what is female, um, and the attributes we ascribe to those categories. But it doesn't take you very far to watch those things unravel. Like Owen was talking about certain colors being colors for women, such as pink, which like if you go far enough back in history, pink was really
reverse.
expensive to make. So it was like only for like royal princes, like only like men of like royal lineage could wear pink. Or clothing. Clothing is our favorite because like boy oh boy, like you just look through history and it's like what are pants, what's a dress, who's wearing what, and also how those things not just convey gender, but also a lot of times class, status, power itself, right? The fabric you can wear, the more expensive the color dye was, the more money you presented yourself as a woman. Um, so yeah, one thing that we're facing right now that dovetails with this is this discussion that keeps happening of student participation in sports. There's the opposite definition of who can participate in sports that is inclusive of gender in sports. And that's always interesting to us because we think a lot of people get up into this hard science idea of the biological particular advantages of having certain sports. And we think that ethnicity like a misconception.
Daniel,
Sorry,
your sound is going, it's going in and out and getting anywhere from hard to hear to robotic to okay. There you go. You're
As it's
back.
Yay.
That's better.
Anyway, we'll flip it over to you, Owen. We were just talking about this issue that comes like this issue right now for us is most present in when people talk about sports and this idea that like there's an advantage somehow that you can get specifically being a trans woman in sports, that you have some kind of unfair advantage because you have this science or biology behind you, which like to varying degrees isn't true just as a scientific concept, biological concept, but also we think misses the point and where this power comes back and this gender construction comes back. And it misses this point of what society has done in terms of constructing gender, how society treats women in sports in general, and why and what the motivation really is for people trying to exclude specifically trans women from participating in sports.
Yeah, and that's not unlike what folks have done for at least a couple centuries in proving this in when they're trying to prove the superiority of the white race, right? The so-called medical investigations, the medical experiments in terms of why black people are are the way they are the way they are, marrying measuring the femur bone, measuring the all these aspects of physical to try to then say, well, no, this is the superior, and therefore this person, and figuring out why, even they've done it with intelligence, they've done it with all kinds of things, but what they're measuring is just like one little aspect, and they're not even accurate about it, right? Because they only want to find what they're looking for, and that becomes the same. The other thing that, again, the winning, right? Because it's about winning in our society, right? It's not about learning to play. It's not about enjoying sports. It's not about any of that. It's about winning. And if girls, females, participate in male sports, they get lucky. But if trans girls, trans boys, or trans girls, trans women, win, well, then it's about the science of it. And what they also don't understand, though, is the science of, hormone blockers or hormones, or we have some cisgender women who have very high testosterone levels, or, they just really dismiss, and then they continue to perpetuate this belief, right? The interesting thing, and I always use this as an example, is no one ever complains about the kid whose parents buys the private tutoring, the private coaching, the best equipment, right? Gets them all the playtime they need. Nobody ever says, well, that's a really unfair advantage, right? Nobody ever complains about that, because the power, people win with that power, and it's okay to have that winning power, right? So I think that's part of it. But the whole social construct, what toys people play with. In my training, I throw up dinosaurs, and then people are like, well, dinosaurs are, well, that's gender neutral. I'm like, it didn't used to be, but that was a boy's toy, right? That was, boys played with dinosaurs. And I know when I was a kid, girls didn't play with chemistry sets, and girls didn't do these science, and my favorite things were science and math. And if I used society, then therefore I was a boy, right? Because that was my where I was really good. That was my interest. So if we actually went that way, I wasn't an anomaly. I was, part of I was right in the right anatomy. And I say that jokingly because we genderize everything. We genderize everything. And I got to admit, I have two granddaughters, and I'm very careful about the clothes I buy them, the toys I buy them. Like, I am always relieved when, my granddaughter Charlotte's like, I love dinosaurs. I'm like, yes, I want to play with trucks. Yes. I have she got a, you go to Build-A-Bear. She built a dinosaur, gave them a male name, and then put a princess dress on them. And I was like, so your bear's or your dinosaur's name is this? And they're wearing a beautiful princess dress. Yeah, that's what he likes. I'm like, cool, really cool. And she didn't have the words for it. And my son's like, works for me. And I'm like, cool. And so anyways, it I often ask, the more we look at it, really how are we basing gender? And most of the time it comes down to genitals. That's what people want to talk about, right? And I often say, well, but think about it. I know some women who've had double mastectomies due to cancer, and their biggest fear is they're not going to be seen as women, that they're losing their womanhood because, and I truly believe our society puts so much emphasis on our appearance of something and not sort of what is the essence. And I don't know if gender actually has an essence. I don't know anymore. So I find myself still trying to fit into those boxes, but at the same time, I try to open up the boxes, or even explode the boxes, for folks I know who don't fit into everyone's box, and particularly if I think there's a power play in the works. So yeah.
Thank you. Very touching. I think it's amazing. Thank you for sharing your story about your grandchildren. I think it's amazing how our younger generations are open minded. I think it's attributed a lot to the doors that have been opened, the expressions of our older generation coming out and having the courage to come out and to speak about their own lived experiences, because our younger generation are open, kind, and accepting, very much so. And I believe it's for those due to those who have paved the way and the courage so far. So hopefully that continues. It's a scary world, but it's also eye opening to see our younger folks so open, loving, and accepting as a whole. So as we close up, I have one final question, if that's okay with you all. Thank you again for everyone who's still on and for your patience. Given the way many trans people express their gender, in what ways do trans people expand ideas about gender? What are your thoughts?
Ooh, it's that is the cool part about queerness, is that it is a little mutable. Like, there is a way that we are now between a gender binary. There's like lots of options. And it's interesting, when we were talking about gender construction just in the last question, like, the idea too is not that we're taking away like these traditional ideas of what it means, of what masculine is or feminine is. Like, it's just adding more. It's sort of like a both and idea. And so yeah, we think trans and non-binary and gender non-conforming people literally show possibility. Like, we are a walking embodiment of other options, that there's of other possibility, that there's multiple versions, multiple possibilities out there, which we hope trickles into everything, right? Trickles into every part of the world, and specifically New York State government, that there's so many possibilities of how we could approach something or how we could do something. And so we hope that it opens more doors and possibilities.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I disagree. I agree 100%, because how cool would it be when we're putting our thought process in, how to make sure everyone's fed and how to make sure everyone's housed and everybody has the proper health care and all of that, and not how do we define gender so that we can put everybody into boxes, and then who gets what, and who gets promoted, who doesn't, and all those different things that we spend a lot of time. But I think it is, when visibility matters, right? And the more that I think part of the reason this generation, I'm going to sound like an old man, this generation, is more accepting, is, as long as they're not taught to hate and to play the game, is that they see more people, right? There's more trans people that are visible or talking or identifying, and they're more non-binary and gender fluid, gender queer, and all of those things that they're like, they question, like little kids question, like, why is that a boy's toy? Like, I like trucks, so as long as we just let humans be humans, I think, like everything, we'd be a little bit better off. Before we close, I do want to say one thing, because I'm always a little sad when my family members never check into me when we're being particularly attacked in the media, and all of that is, if you're on, and that, and you're not, and you're cisgender, please remember to check in on your trans, non-binary, gender fluid, gender queer, gender non-conforming folk, because it can be really hard when you're constantly sort of being beat up. I know, just having one person, I've got one person who isn't even super close to me, but just says, "Hey man, it's a brutal time. How you doing? You okay?" So I think it's important to check in on folks, because you know, we need everybody. We need everybody. So thank you for this. Thank you for everyone's time.
Dr. Branch, before I close out, would you like to add anything or grab anything from the group chat? I didn't see any questions or anything, but did anyone want to add any notes before I close the session out?
So I've been monitoring the chat and I've not seen anything, but what I will, my parting shot across the bow,
Good Navy reference.
thank you, is this, and I sort of opened with it informally before we started the session. And the notion of culture is singular, but culture proper is multiplicitous. And culture is the collection of lived experiences of people, and everyone's lived experience is not the same. And so, as I toss to Deputy Commissioner Indardeo, I am Dr. Branch, and I will see you all next time.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, just closing it all in, and again, thank you all for staying with us. I know this was an especially long session, and my heart goes out to our panelists. Thank you for telling your stories, for your authenticity, and the courageous ways in which you live your lives every day, and for your representation of the transgender community. I will say, and the LGBTQ community just as a whole, I know that it's not easy. Visibility specifically is also so important because we are leading the next generation. And again, that makes us all sound old, but absolutely we are. Where would we be without the ones who led us into this path or in the right direction when we were trying to be our authentic selves and didn't know really where to go? And they shined the light for us. I hope you all continue to share your stories. I know you will, especially for those who may not know how to go about doing so, and just being themselves and being authentic. Again, authenticity is so important, having been a service member like you, Owen, who had to live in the days of don't ask, don't tell. And remember, sharing begets sharing, and we can all come together in this effort as the work continues to hopefully move in the right direction with love and light. Thank you for joining us today. Again, we see you. Like Dr. Branch said, we appreciate you. Happy Pride and be safe.
Happy Pride.
Thanks, everyone.